Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with Season 7, Episode 6 of our weekly Q&A videos. We had to record this intro a second time because I forgot and said way too many letters. But the important part is if you're watching this on YouTube, check out the links in the description to listen to this only. Listen and not watch, not on YouTube.
Right.
And a bunch of different places that aren't YouTube, but only places which give you podcasts. Anyways, getting into our first question. It comes from Matt H0351, and they say, I'm getting an online glitch where the last battle of a 7-match battle is always this user, and then in brackets, it doesn't really matter, but exclamation mark, Joker. I keep fighting this user at the end of all the battles, question mark. Is this a glitch or coincidence?
All right, so hold on. How did you say their name? Was it Matt H or Math?
I said Matt H0351. You think it's Matt?
Math. You know, like
Matha.
something like that. I'm gonna say this is one of the easier questions, but it's funny kind of speculating that I think it's probably just coincidence.
Yeah.
I don't know that you'd be surprised at what the hackers have been able to do as far as moving themselves up the leaderboard, but I don't think they've been able to hack the matchups. Although there was a time when people were able to hack the algorithm and get themselves a lot more defensive fights, more than should have been justified. So I thought I had the right answer.
Yeah.
And now I think maybe not.
The way that I think we figure out is if you actually, the next time you see them, you can still go on profiles for information, right?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, I haven't done it in so long that I was worried that it maybe got patched out or something, because I do remember they took the video off, right?
Yeah, I love the replay videos.
Yeah.
Those used to be great, even when they were glitchy.
Yeah, so what I would say is you can go onto his profile, or their profile, I guess. I shouldn't make assumptions. But you can go onto their profile, and you can actually see what their stats are like. And if they have an absolute ton of defense wins, and they are like at a high percent, it's possible that they're hacking.
Right.
But if you look at it, and, you know, it's some multiple of like however many times that you've personally fought them,
right?
Then it's probably just people with similar teams. Coming in.
The easiest would be to make a minor adjustment on your team, like switch out one character. I mean, what it would be interesting would be finding out what Math's or Matt H's team had.
Yeah, if it stays the same team and you continue fighting them even when you change yours, or if they seem to change with you, then there's more of a chance that it's a glitch. But we think if you are playing with the same people, which we often do, then it seems the most likely that it's a coincidence, and he is just one of the people. He's just the person that the matchmaker has decided is the exact right stat distribution for your for the team that you're fighting him with.
Right.
So there we go. But, you know, if you get a screenshot or if it looks a little suspicious, send that our way. We'd like to see it. That would be interesting to talk about on a future week to follow up. Next question comes from DI Wackygaming. And they say, have you guys played Injustice on console? And if you did, what are your thoughts on it? And if you didn't, will you guys ever play it?
All right, so this is a totally unrelated issue that I'm looking at as I'm looking at Wackygaming's name.
Yeah.
This is why a sans serif font is such a pain
It's
in
either
the butt.
dull or capital
DL,
D, capital I.
Like download or DI.
Yeah.
So which one is it? Part of me, when I was scanning past it, I almost thought it was DJ.
Definitely not that. I can tell you that it's definitely not DJ. I cannot comment past that.
Sorry. There were two questions, right?
Yeah. Have you guys ever played... Oh, sorry. My second question is, what caused you guys to stop playing Mortal Kombat Mobile?
I'm not sure I even remember. At least the second part. So you can talk more about the console, because I'm not a console game player, really.
Yeah. So at the time that Injustice 1 was relevant to us, we didn't have any consoles that it was out on, except for PC. So I have, at various times, both bought for myself and then bought for other people, because whenever it would go on sale, back in the day, actually, we gave away some copies of Injustice on console.
Right.
It went on sale on Steam. It was like, I think like $6 or something.
Yes.
And so we bought like 2 or 3 copies and then gave them away.
That was fun.
It was, yeah. And I do own the first Injustice game myself. more to support the devs and actually play. And I played a little bit. The problem is, I didn't have a controller at the time.
Oh.
And if you've ever tried to play a fighting game with keyboard
Yeah.
controls, you know that you don't play fighting games with keyboard controls.
Yeah.
So I played a tiny bit. It might actually be worthwhile to play now again.
To me, the platonic ideal of playing a fighting game is the Street Fighter 2 stand-up arcade game layout with joystick and 6 buttons.
Mm-hmm.
That was... So I haven't played... I don't think I've played console games much, but I used to... There's that sort of small window where when I first started working, and there's an arcade downstairs where I was working, and I would go spend my lunches there and spend like $1 or whatever and play Street Fighter, and Street Fighter 2 technically, but it was so good. So I never got around to playing Injustice, and it's ironic because Injustice, the game, the mobile game, I think it was positioned originally to be advertising for the console.
Yeah.
And as an independent game, it's taken on sort of
It continued to get updated after the second game came out, yeah.
So even after the console really isn't much of a going concern, that the fact that... I mean, we moan a lot about how the mobile game is dying.
Yeah.
But it's survived... To me, it survived longer than console ever did.
Yeah, and, you know... I think one of the things is because in the first console game, right, there wasn't much in terms of progression, right?
Yeah.
Which makes sense, that's how most fighting games are. Although people in newer days, they've gone a little differently sometimes, right? Like Injustice 2 actually did have a progression system.
Right.
I think that was optional for the people who wanted that. So for us, it didn't have the same appeal, actually, because the moment-to-moment gameplay isn't actually what a draw would be. It was the convenience and the ability to sort of upgrade, right? The ability to play over time and mark progress, right? There was sort of goals. And in fighting games, that's all skill-based. And because, you know, the console game, we wouldn't have time to actually put that much time into it. Right. In terms of fighting games, I mean, neither of us play fighting games actively. And
not for a long time.
Only very occasionally play fighting games passively, and the ones that I do are sort of non-traditional. Like I play Smash.
Right. Did I ever tell you that story when I was at a stand-up console for Street Fighter 2 and I was playing against some guy? But because I've only ever played a second player, I can't do the Hurricane Punch. Like, you know, Ken and Ryu are the sort of basic fundamental characters. They've got the good balance of speed and power, and so I couldn't only do the Hurricane Punch consistently from the right side, but I could do it really well. Yeah. So the etiquette on the game is that if you're playing against a live person, if you win the first one, you let them win the second one. Yeah. So you can get them as much longer, as so you get to play longer, and then the third one is the only one that counts. So I think I can't remember who won the first one and the second one, but we were just playing whatever. And then the last game, what I did was I got him sort of not quite in the corner, but close to the corner. Yeah. And I just did
Hurricane Punch over and over again.
All right, so the big Hurricane Punch does more damage. Yeah. But there's a longer period where you're vulnerable when you're coming back down if they block. So when you do the light Hurricane Punch... Yeah, so when you do light Hurricane Punch, if they block and they try to counterpunch...
You can just do another Hurricane.
If you're fast enough, there's no leg. And I was fast enough. And I'll never have that moment of glory again.
Where you just Hurricane punched over.
I just hurt right into the corner.
I don't know how much of a moment of glory that is. That just must have been very frustrating for him.
So the thing is, right, because you can block, but
you still take some damage.
You take a little bit of damage. Yeah. Or if you try to counterpunch when they're vulnerable, then you can get yourself out of the corner, right? Yeah. But there's no other move if you can do it fast enough, and I was just like right on for that, just that one game, and I don't think I've ever had a moment like that again.
So there we go. Yeah. So that's the answer to both parts of those questions.
What is it?
The second part we just said I don't remember.
I sort of vaguely remember. So there was a time where we were doing 3 games. Yeah. On this channel. So
WWE Immortals, Injustice, and Mortal Kombat.
And I got to tell you, at the time it was a drain, and it felt like, as much as it might feel like burning out now, like 800 videos later, that was still early on. We were maybe at 100 videos. Yeah. And it still felt like too much because the time it takes to play the game enough to get good at it, to accumulate whatever resources you need in the game, like the characters or the currency or whatever, and there was really no time for anything else. So the first thing that put me off Mortal Kombat X was when they introduced that higher tier of characters, and I can't remember what they called it.
Where you needed like the special currency.
Yeah, and so then at that point I was done because I couldn't justify, like, out of all the 3 games, our favorite has always been Injustice, I think,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because of the characters. And to maintain that game with that much extra work to try to get stuff in it, it just wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
'Cause I don't think we've never had the personalities that made people want to watch us because we're playing the game.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it had to do with having some, whatever little expertise there was, and something to offer as far as advice, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, the personality part was not our niche.
Yeah, although I think we've found some people who like our personality part. You can't please everybody, but it turns out we can please like at least a handful of people. There's some people listening now who would probably argue with us, and those people are surprising and appreciated in equal measure.
And unsurprisingly, a very small number, but that's okay. We appreciate them just as much as if they were a big crowd.
And I think that brings us right into our sort of big mega question again.
So before we get into that too, all right, so there's been a lot of stuff going on with the pandemic, and I want to address some of it, but I feel like we're going to run out of time, but we'll see how it goes, and maybe at the end I'll try to squeeze a few things out, because it's just everything changes so much each week. The stuff I wanted to do last week that I put off, it's already obsolete, it's already done.
So this is another big mega question. We've got somebody who's been stepping up to make sure that we've got a lot of content to answer. And some pretty quality questions. This one comes from Stelmaria again, and they say, "Thanks for the response, guys." And it is Stelmaria. One of you got it right this time.
That was me.
A little bit of a dig at me. That's okay. I forgive you. Very fair. This is going to be a long one, boys. Strap in. Considering the last one took nearly an hour, it might make sense to spin this over 2 weeks and pick out the relevant points. LOL. Reply/discussion pieces from this podcast, which was season 7, episode 5, which we're now in episode 6. I've never actually read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, only listened to the radio play and watched the movie, but I can definitely say Adam's sense of humor translates masterfully to radio, especially. And,
Yeah, I guess, definitely, I mean, it's sort of worded in a way, that statement, right, that hints at it, but it's, I think, fundamentally, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was a play first.
Yeah, because when you talked about it last week, you talked about it being a play, but I think even the stuff that maybe wasn't initially meant to be a play, Dirk Gently translates wonderfully, right?
Right.
So we definitely know that some of his other stuff,
it might be his sensibility, right?
It might be, yeah, because it's a very it's very rich, right?
It can be. So this is the part where it's that sort of cooperative. It's a cooperative experience, right, between the reader and the writer. And what the reader brings to it is their voice. And I think if you lose a lot when you have, humorous novels, if you don't have the right voice, if the reader doesn't bring... And I think that's part of the reason why I bounced off Hitchhiker's Guide so much when I first read it.
And I think, too, it can... One of the problems with something that's really sharp when it's a book or when it's just literature, when it's a different media, is that some of the comedy, when the comedy comes, as it does in Hitchhikers, I haven't seen the adaptations, but just from what I've seen of Hitchhikers, where the narrator, right, just even the narrative voice of the book itself is so sharp, right? That sort of stuff, if you had a TV show for that, for example, I don't know how that would translate over exactly. I think that's definitely a challenge when every bit of the writing is crammed with humor, and it's not just humorous characters or a humorous plot.
Right.
You definitely run into an issue when you're putting it in a medium that maybe doesn't have that same spot for a narrator and for an authorial voice.
Yeah.
But it's good to know that it translates well to an audio medium. That might be the way to consume it then, because it'll definitely be faster.
Yeah. Well, so when you say authorial voice, it makes me think of the other thing where when people aren't writing stuff, they think that the most important part is the idea. And they, have you seen this where people have an idea and they say, "Oh, listen, I'll go halves with you, and if you write this, I've got this great idea."
Oh,
for you.
yeah, where people basically are just like, you know what would sell? I got a great business idea for you. I'll be the ideas man, and you'll be the boots on the ground, whatever. You'll handle the distribution and marketing and whatever.
Right, that's exactly what I was thinking this basically now in this weekly Q&A, we both get to be the ideas guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's funny and not so funny how much work goes into when you talk to writers or see some of the process, how much of it has really to do with their particular voice.
Yeah.
And so, again, apropos not the same thing, but just sort of related that I saw this week was an artist saying, an artist style. You know what an artist style is, right? Their style are mistakes that they can't fix out of their work.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a different take on it, but I do think it whether it's a mistake or not, or something that they would change if they could.
Yeah,
they become so associated with it and it's so distinctive that it's there can be potentially a beauty to it, right? Mm-hmm. Same way, like when I'm reading comic book, I can tell at least the artists that I spend a lot of time reading in like the 90s growing up that I can usually tell their style one from another. Although now there's so many other artists that have a look that I'm not familiar with. Mm-hmm. I can't know them.
One style that I really like, this is tangentially related, and it's sort of a genre of style which I really adore. It's most often in like blog or opinion pieces, mm-hmm. writing for different sources. It's like almost it's almost gothic. It's when they take a really ridiculous situation and they handle it with complete seriousness. It's this really sort of almost self-aggrandizing tone, but when the content is so silly that that it has to be a joke. And it's hard because I can only sort of...
You mean like a deadpan kind of style?
Almost, but in pure writing. And it's hard to talk about what that is without going into examples. There's an article where somebody, like TGI Fridays had like infinite appetizers, and they decided to see how truly infinite they were and decided to sit for an entire workday in the TGI Fridays eating nothing but mozzarella sticks and seeing how many they could get through. And they cataloged their experiences. Like they did timestamps, so it'd be like 8:07 a.m. I've arrived at the TGI Fridays, whatever. And so they go step by step, and sort of it's ostensibly a descent into madness as they spend longer and longer. Like their bosses said if they eat at least X number, they get like a week vacation or something like that. They have like a side bet going with somebody where they're giving them however much, like after however many plates of mozzarella sticks, they're giving them X number of like dollars per mozzarella stick they can eat. And it's just them sitting there for the entire day, and by like the second plate they're like, these things taste like cardboard. Like I've made a terrible mistake at one point.
Terrible mistake.
Their waitress swaps over, and they're like, okay, so here's your new person, and the new person comes in and they're like, I need you to open your new check with you. So like they ended up needing to buy a second drink, and they're like, I guess this is the end of the infinite apps. It turns out there is a limitation. I need to purchase a second drink. And I don't know if it's right at the end, but like one of their things is like like the bill is $5. I tip 400% because they've been there for the entire day. Oh my God. Getting like free refills and mozzarella sticks.
Okay, so as you were starting to say that, part of me was thinking, okay, so that's just so gross. I mean, there's lots of other things that I think I'd be willing to do just to try to do for the sake of doing it.
Yeah.
But it's just such abuse of your body to be eating that much and that stuff. And then it just occurs to me too, though, that a lot of those extreme kind of world record elite performances in ways are more subtly also abusing your body, mm-hmm. because the people who take endurance training or strength training or whatever to the extreme often suffer for it physically. Like it's a cool thing that they're able to do, but it less obviously, more subtly, they're doing very much a dangerous thing.
Yeah, almost counterintuitively.
Yeah, well, I was reading an article where they were talking about people who run marathons. If they run mm-hmm. more than a certain number of marathons per year, that they are more likely to die from heart disease, mm-hmm. which isn't intuitively the answer that you'd expect, because people who are able to run marathons mm-hmm. have to be in pretty good shape to do it. But that somehow the inflammatory markers in their body are much higher, and that might be, I mean, we also know that inflammatory markers are a predictor for heart disease. Mm-hmm.
I'm still thinking of the food thing, and a little more practical. Do you remember the time that Eastside Mario's had 2-for-1 entrees?
Oh, yes!
And so we went in, I ordered the entree that I wanted, and then I want to say like 95% just the free bread and soup, and I kept getting refills on the bread and soup, and so then I left there with two entrees for the price of one, and a dinner already under my belt. So it was.
But the soup was good.
Yeah,
it was.
The soup was quite good.
I think it was like a nice minestrone soup.
Oh, we're gonna have to.
1402.
Yeah, well, all right, they got cut off. We will never know.
That's
a
true.
mystery.
You know what? We sort of pseudo-doxed somebody, but that's fine.
Yeah. Oh no! All right, so yeah, because that was their special deal, right? Like
Yeah.
it was going to be over soon, so we wanted to
It
make
was
sure we
like
took advantage
Italian
of it.
wedding soup or something, I think.
Was it?
It was something nice.
It was. So Italian wedding soup is more like a green soup.
Yeah, and there's like the little pearls in it.
Was that what it was? Because I maybe my memory's gone, and it's a lot of the other times we've gone is blurred.
I did
was thinking it
something
was
almost
tomato
the same
soup.
thing at an Olive Garden. It was definitely not a tomato soup, but you know, I think there's something inherently very satisfying when there's a deal and they have the infinite, because that's not an appetizer exactly, but the soup was close enough. Like infinite soup and bread. It was a nice sort of, it was like a fake garlic bread where they had like a garlic oil.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But it was quite tasty.
Right.
And so I just filled up on my bread and soup, and I took my 2 entrees home, and so I got 2 full big meals, like 2 full dinner size meals, and then a 3rd dinner size meal in the Eastside Mario's itself. And I remember feeling a little sheepish after a certain point because I was ordering. Every time the waitress came by again, it was like, "Can I get more bread and soup, please?"
Well, I don't think they're surprised at that. I remember reading something about how people. I mean, there's not an Olive Garden, I think, in our area anymore.
Yeah.
But when we went for a driving trip in the States, right?
Yeah.
We hit an Olive Garden.
We did.
And that there are people who go to Olive Garden specifically so they can pack up their entree.
Yeah.
And have a meal later. I think a lot of
Seniors
do that.
Yeah.
And so that they fill up on the appetizers because the salad and soup is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like we're blazing any new ground.
I know. I'm just saying that I feel an inordinate sense of pride, and that's probably evidenced by the fact that I am sharing this to sort of the wider public.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's something to be proud of, just in a general sense, but on a personal level, it is.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did. I remember it fondly. You know, there's not a lot of meals that I specifically remember. There's not a lot of times I've gone out to eat, and I can specifically point to it and say, I know exactly what this experience was like, but I can't say that about the Eastside Mario's grift.
So, which is funny because you would think that your best memories would or should come from, like, really good food and not the gaming of the system.
I remember some good meals, too. Do we want to talk about one incredible meal that we remember now? Just apropos of nothing?
I don't know.
Okay, because I will say one of the best places I've ever eaten at is the Heirloom. Is it Heirloom or Heritage? It's one of the two. Food truck. And so it works in the sort of the Greater Toronto area. It's at different places, and they have a pork belly banh mi sandwich. Right. They have a lot of good stuff. They have duck confit poutine, which is also really good, but it's so heavy, and you cannot have both of those things or you will explode. And so the pork belly banh mi sandwich is one of the best sandwiches I've ever had. It's just so rich and juicy and delicious, and I remember that food truck, and there's been places that we've gone to where we've seen that the food truck is going to be somewhere.
Oh, and
on like a weekend day.
Like there's an event.
Yeah, there was an event, and there's always been other things that would potentially be the draw too. But I show up knowing that the food truck is going to be there and being very excited for the food truck. I think it's here.
I'm looking it up right now. You just keep on going. I'm just.
I don't know if I have too much more to say about it, but that's
no, but if we're gonna say it, I want to make sure
it was an incredible. You're looking up another restaurant. No, the Banh Mi Boys is great. That's just good, like well priced.
But I'm just trying to think if we're gonna be. Like,
if we're giving them a plug. Yeah. So for anybody who's in the Greater Toronto area,
I can't find it.
Why don't you try to go over your meal and I will find it.
All right. So then, what was the next part of the question, or did we even answer that first part of the question?
It is Heirloom. It's called Heirloom Toronto.
Okay.
Voted best food truck 2019 by Now Magazine. Voted best food truck 2018 through 2020 by me.
Oh yeah.
So that's the official food truck of the year for BDCKR Gaming. Is the Heirloom Toronto food truck.
Very good.
There we go.
I'm looking forward to actually hitting again when the isolation or the distancing measures are passed.
We have done our poor man's interpretation of it at home, where we take barbecues.
Yeah.
If you want to make something and sort of semi recreate the experience, this is what you do. You take hoisin sauce, hoisin. And you mix that with barbecue sauce. I personally use Sweet Baby Ray's.
So in English, it's hoisin, right?
Yeah.
But in Chinese, I think Cantonese is hoisin. So it's like it's seafood.
Yeah.
I don't know if literally that's what it means, but the sound of it is like seafood.
Okay. But so hoisin sauce and barbecue sauce, whatever your preference is, about 50-50, but just whatever to taste. And then you take some pork belly and you slice it thin enough and small enough that you can have it in bites so that you're not pulling a bunch of it out when you try to take a bite of the sandwich.
But the way you prepare it and cook it is while it's still one piece, because otherwise if you just slice it early, all that is bacon.
Yeah, so
that's the cut, right?
Yeah,
pork
that's
belly
true.
is bacon.
Yeah, so you cook it up and then you slice it and then you toss it in a barbecue sauce. And then you can put whatever you want with it. So you can do shredded lettuce, whatever you want for your green, your sort of roughage for texture.
All right, what's ridiculous is
a good bun of your
dinner,
choice.
you're talking about this and it's making me hungry. I don't
so
even
good.
eat fatty stuff a lot, but it's the flavor of it that was really good with the bread.
Because I think you had like a bite or two of it.
I did.
Yeah, and it's incredible, and it doesn't hold a candle to it. The way that they do it is something better, obviously.
Right.
But it's pretty good. I think the way that they do it, they have like a pickled slaw.
Right.
Some like Asian slaw, I think. I don't remember what specifically is in it, but so there we go. That is probably the best sandwich I've ever had, and a way to make a version of it at home.
Okay.
So there we go. Didn't think we'd do food advice today, but getting to the first actual question from Stealth.
Oh yeah, right. The first part was a comment, not even a question. Okay.
Yeah. They say
that's not the next one. Isn't even a question. I don't see a question mark anywhere.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Okay, there's just another comment. Yeah, so they were right about probably not being able to get to all of these in 1 week, just because we talk so much. Just jumping off point is all we need. We don't need a lot to get us going, obviously, because Douglas Adams brought us to Banh Mi.
Oh, pork belly sandwich.
Yeah. But anyways, they say, realistically, with the airplane mode glitch, it takes about 30 seconds to a minute to do a pack and reset, providing I don't screw it up, so I'm definitely fine with going over and over, because there are a few gear items I'd be fine getting, so I'm less picky than I made out earlier in the comment. I'm really looking for Ibis and Tantu Totem, but there are a lot of things I could easily settle for, as they would be rare Survivor drops anyway, such as Lexicor Gauntlets, League of Assassins Knives, and Fourth World Mace.
All right, so I think somebody else was asking in the comments, and I didn't pull this for our questions, but about the probability of getting different gears, and those are literally the rarest of the three Survivor gear sets. Mm-hmm. And so, but the numbers really make a difference depending how picky you are. Because if you want one, so let's say if we go back to the original,
I'm gonna just say for any of those three, if you're doing the reset, it makes way more sense to actually bank up some last laugh tickets and do the reset on last laugh to get that gear than it does to do it with your packs.
That's true.
So if those are ones that you're okay with, it's fine. And I guess.
Well, but here's the thing, right? So if you're going to do them, you actually want to have more options that you want, because then it makes it more productive. So even though it might be cheaper with the last laugh tickets,
the fact that there's 5,
the fact that there's that many that you want, it actually probably makes sense. And then once you get Tantu Totem Ibistic, but you don't get all the Survivor ones you want, then you go to last tickets, and that's probably the most efficient way to use your time. Yeah,
but that's. I think that's cool, and considering it's not a question, I think we should probably go quicker.
Well, but this is so as it applies to Injustice, though. This is a strategy. When we were in the earlier game, this is a strategy I took with the challenge pack or the gold pack. Yeah. So I would completely avoid directly promoting anybody. Mm-hmm. Because the challenge packs, even when I had them unlocked, the challenge pack was cheaper.
Yeah. So in that way, we were getting everybody sort of at the same. Approximately, because they were all approximately the same rarity, that when we averaged out, we ended up with people who were mostly just all promoted through the challenge pack, and it was only for the last few that we had unlocked in the store.
At the point where the packs were costing money, like they were no longer a good deal. 150,000 credits. Was the point where it was worth switching over to direct promotion.
But it was good too, because when the challenge pack first came out, because we were on Android this was a long time ago. Yeah. But there was challenges that only came out on iOS and not Android. Correct. And so there's characters that people had for iOS whose challenges were done, and this was back when they weren't cycling through anything new, where it was just like 3 weeks on, 1 week off for the challenge. It was basically like a month-long cycle. And so the challenge pack was the only way to get characters, and you couldn't unlock them in the store to promote them. So that strategy sort of paid off double, because it meant that we had to spend the least amount of time hunting for the unlocked characters to get them all the way up, and we were getting everybody else. And I do remember when the elite level increased, how we were for the first time when it went from 5 to 7, how it was a huge pain to get those chase characters again. And afterwards, you actually accumulated a couple extra copies because you said you never know when they're going to increase the elite level again. Right. And then eventually, when they
did,
Elite 10, your, I don't want to call it paranoia, but your
hoarding.
Your hoarding finally paid off.
Well, what's funny?
A moment of vindication for you.
The irony is that at this point, there's a lot of characters that I'm deciding not to promote past even Elite 5. So consider, like, I guess it was good. We saved a bit. We didn't hoard. But we ended up not even really needing to save for some of them because it wasn't worth it.
So there we go.
Yeah.
The next chunk is...
Oh, wait, no, we didn't... Sorry. I want to say something about the 30 seconds.
Oh, okay.
So let's say we were doing the one gear that you wanted, though, right?
Yeah.
So even 30 seconds to a minute is huge. So let's say it's at the lower end. It's 30 seconds. And you want one particular piece of gear. If you're going to be opening 1,000 packs and it's taking you 30 seconds to do it...
Yeah.
Then that's what? 500 minutes, which is over 8 hours.
Yeah. For a single piece of gear. Wow. That does put it into stark contrast.
Right, so you're not actually earning anything extra. Like, it'd be different if you're grinding for 8 hours and got something, because then you'd still have other stuff that you would get.
Mm-hmm, but it's 8 hours of just pure resets.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
So that's where you need to find the balance between what your time is worth, what other stuff you can get, and whether it's worth resetting. Like, because if you reset after 5, it's way faster than if you reset after 1, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think it was a question last week or the week before where they're talking about, well, how many should I accumulate before I do it? It really has to do with how much time you've got to waste and what your tolerance is for a really... Like, there's glitches where you're playing the game. Challenge reset, you're playing the game. When you're doing it and you're not actually playing it, you're just mindlessly resetting, then it's not nearly as fun or productive.
Yeah, although, if you haven't listened to all the episodes of our Q&A, got a bit of a backlog, something to do with your, something to engage you while you're doing something with your hands.
Oh, that's true. That's perfect for when your mind is just wandering. As you know, the danger is, though, that you get what you want and then you reset it. I've done that.
That's true. And I guess the other danger is that you spend a lot of time listening to us talk instead of potentially a more engaging podcast.
Yeah, more educational podcast.
And later, Stelmaria actually has a podcast recommendation for us, or just mentions the podcast that they quite like, and I think I can drop a few podcast recommendations for people in general. If you've got some time on your hands and you want to consume some content, there's some stuff that I'll put my seal of approval behind for things that people can do with their time, and hopefully not that instead of listening to us, but if it is, I couldn't blame anybody. So there we go. Next chunk says, I'd more likely use animated Harley with a plain team, Gold Nightwing and Doomsday Prime, so her stats may not be as bad in terms of matchmaking. I've been around the channel for a while now, saw the Survivor Tips Guide when it was published, so I'm aware of the vanilla teams, and I'd rather have Harley Quinn over Cyborg because I think she'd work better as a support with her Special 2 and be used as a tank, even though Doomsday can do a lot of that job for himself. And I think my favorite part of this is saying that I've been around for the Survivor Tips, so I know the vanilla teams. That terminology is no longer familiar to me. I have forgotten. Or even if it's not the terminology we use, when I was talking, aware of the vanilla teams in our Survivor Tips, I was like, what teams did we talk about in our Survivor Tips video? I don't remember.
I think they might be conflating a couple of things, because Survivor Tips we talked mainly about. The biggest part was, besides like the little tricks to make it easier,
or without conflating things, I think if you read it again, it's possible that they just meant that being around since then, so they're aware of what sort of our vanilla teams are in general.
So that's
just a marker of time, and then in between then and now.
Yeah, never mind. That's right.
Yeah, so totally I don't actually think it might be our reading comprehension.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And not
so
any.
The thing is, I mean, if I want to, this is the thing when we make the videos, right? There's a lot of things that occur to me after we publish them, and one of the things that maybe I didn't emphasize enough when making those videos was it wasn't necessarily so much that those particular teams were good. They were sort of just to prove a point that the vanilla teams, at least the characters that are available in the store from the very beginning, that you don't have to do anything special to get them, that you could still make a decent team out of it. And so listen, I get animated Harley Quinn was in the store also. She wasn't originally. She was in the second wave. Remember when it was Elite 5, level 40?
Yeah.
Animated Harley Quinn was not there yet.
Mm.
So it was more to prove a point and make a team as not as bad as we could, but as making Cyborg doesn't get a lot of love.
Yeah,
he's not a great character.
It was making a team from the most convenient parts, and it was making teams that you were least likely to have already out of energy. So it was like if you want to build a second team, if you got a first team and you want to build a second team for the least number of resources and have the least chance for conflict between your setups.
Now, and that's probably. I know, I love how we contradict ourselves a bit. And that's sort of true with Cyborg and sort of not true with Doomsday, because Doomsday is a pretty good character. So Doomsday, I think, was on that team. I can't remember now. But it was really, in that case, was to try to do something with Cyborg, because he does kind of suck a bit. When he's in the fight, he's not doing much. When he's not in the fight, he's not doing much, unless he's already been in the fight and taken some damage. Yeah. Because his passive is all about recovering health. And
if he's recovering health like that, just give him one health gear.
True.
His passive. Some people's passives are totally transformative and are way better than any one gear could be. And then some people's passives are like weird, bad kneecapped versions of gears. And that's just like the world's worst health gear.
It is. Absolutely.
Right? Like boosting his health would be better.
Yeah, it's true. No, because he can't.
Anything that would gain his health back would be better. Anything.
Right. If his health is bigger to start with, whatever you can recover if his health were less doesn't reach it. Yeah. And you have to take the damage first and then get out of the fight. Yeah. Before you can even take advantage of his passive. Mm-hmm. So
there we go. Next one, I don't think there's too much to say about this, which is good because we are running out of time.
Are we already?
Not like running out of time.
Oh, because I want to say a bunch of stuff about
exactly. That's what I'm saying.
All right.
So for the survivor question, it makes a lot of sense to go for the crit chance and crit damage, especially for specific cards like Flashpoint Batman due to his passive.
I think it's true. I mean, it was one of the things that we picked up on relatively quickly, and it wasn't an obvious area because everybody, I think, was in a big push to try to
get everybody maxed out.
Yeah, just more damage, more health, and that the first realization was that
it's hidden stats, essentially hidden from the matchmaker.
Yeah, so that's amazing. But if you boosted the damage and health, what's going to happen is that you're going to boost the higher stat characters less proportionally than you boost the lower stat characters.
Oh yeah.
So it was a bit of an equalizer, but then you're equalizing characters that maybe aren't
we're talking
good.
about there within a bracket, because the thing about it too is that when you boost bronze and silver, because it's starting stats, they level up in a different way.
Right.
So boosting bronze and silver is more wasteful. It's better if you want to bring somebody up to be sort of at the level of the tier above them, but from a pure like how much the starting stat boost leads to an end stat boost, boosting golds gave you stats better.
But the boost of the bronze and silvers gave you a better proportional boost.
That's true.
And the lower tier golds got a better proportional boost because it's based on their starting stat, right? Mm-hmm. So it's interesting, but as we played around with it, the good thing is we realized it early enough to not max out anybody's health or damage, or not too many of them, and really focus only on the crit augmentations for the characters we like to play.
That's the one good thing about not having new characters, is we have so many augmentations that just moving through that menu is such a slog now.
Oh yeah.
It's pretty brutal. Yeah. There we go. Our next question, or I guess the next part, which we will talk about very briefly. I think this is just a worthwhile opinion to rebroadcast. Right. Which is, with the MCU stuff, the Avengers were always B tier compared to the X-Men, but when Iron Man movie came out, they started power creeping him and giving him better writers, and used those stories in the movies. So it was a push by Marvel that led to Tony's power creep, because only recently they started really doing something with the capabilities of his brain, rather than him being a drunken idiot, and implementing it in the movies as a result of his popularity in said movies. And, I think that's an interesting point, that it makes some...
I think there's definitely a narrative like that you can create out of it. My perspective is definitely different, and I don't know how much of it is skewed by what access to comics I had. I still remember that, Tony Stark, in the comic books at least, was still as much of a genius as Reed Richards. Yeah. So they're both guys that could, make... they could MacGyver anything, right? That they were just so smart and stuff. And I still remember not so much when he went into... an alcoholic spiral.
Yeah.
And lost everything. I still remember the time when he went into the past and met Morgana Le Fay with Doctor Doom. And to me, those were absolutely brilliant. And you can say that the Avengers were always B tier compared to the X-Men, maybe based on their numbers. But I'm going to argue that that's a selective, I think, memory. Because I still remember reading Avengers comics where George Perez... I don't know. Did you ever read George Perez?
No.
So he's like a big deal. I think he recently just retired. He did Crisis on Infinite Earths. He did the Teen Titans. He did the reboot of Wonder Woman. He has a very distinctive style of art. And back then, when he started the Avengers, and I think he might have been filling in for John Byrne at the time, who was also another big star. He did sort of a John Byrne homage, where the style was not his own yet, but he did it very. You'd have to see it really to know what I mean. But in terms of just straight circulation numbers, there was a time when the Avengers were way bigger than the X-Men. I mean, there's a reason why the early X-Men comics, before I think the Giant Size Annual, were popular but weren't as big. Avengers really had
a heyday?
Big circulation numbers. I mean, they even had spin-offs, right? There was the West Coast Avengers. I don't know if there's each of the characters in the Avengers also had, like Hawkeye and whatever. I'm not really a historian, a comic book historian. I didn't read enough, but I had sort of, I could look at the shelves and see what I wanted to get but couldn't afford to buy. So there was even an X-Men versus Avengers crossover. Am I dating myself? Mark Silvestri drew it. I was so much more aware of the artists than I was of the writers, because there are very few writers that were distinctive enough to make a difference.
I feel like I'm having an aphasia. I'm processing so little of this.
You know what? I will stop right there and say I think I don't know that the Avengers were such B tier compared to the X-Men, at least not for all of their existence, but definitely in the last, say, 10, 20 years in the comics. I agree with you there, but
had a comeback.
They've definitely had a comeback.
Okay, so there we go. And so now we've got to the actual questions. Wow. Tons of time to spare. Do we want to save? Do you want to talk about your coronavirus stuff, and then we'll come back to these if we have time? Do you think?
Okay.
Or do you want to answer a question?
I want to point out something that's happening in maybe in Ontario more than anywhere else, but I can't imagine that the situation is any different. I think there's whatever your feeling is about government, and some people are small government, right? They want as little interference as possible. What we're seeing in Ontario, at least, where most of the deaths and most of the serious cases are coming from nursing homes, the government has really dropped the ball on this. A big part of the reason why there's so much spread, and this is not a sort of fringe opinion, this is reasonably popular, is that there are a lot of people in nursing homes who work at different nursing homes, at more than one, so they're potentially vectors and passing it from one place to another.
Yeah.
And what they're talking about now is banning people from working at different places, at least in the short term.
Yeah.
And I think that's totally ridiculous. What the government should do is step in. It's not the workers' fault that they're working at different places. They don't want to work at a bunch of different places and have to go different places in order to create a full-time salary with no benefits. It's because these corporations, these businesses running nursing homes, have chosen a model where a lot of people are part-time. Yeah. And if they're short enough on hours, they don't get benefits. It's cheaper to hire them. And so they're forcing people to work part-time. And so the legislation really should be setting an upper limit for the amount of their staffing hours that's part-time instead of full-time. Yeah. That's the perfect place for government. It costs the government nothing to do that. And it is ensuring that we don't run into this same kind of stuff. And a bonus is, it means that you get to be decent to people who are actually working for you.
While saving lives.
Right.
Yeah, and also, I think we've talked about this personally. I don't know if we've talked about this on the podcast. I think we might have mentioned it. Just that personal care workers are not getting enough credit for what they're doing because they're, we're talking about it spreading to a lot of the nursing homes, right? They're just as much boots on the ground. They theoretically would have less exposure than a doctor working in the hospital dealing directly with coronavirus patients.
Right.
But the second that there's any risk within the nursing home that they're actually in, then they have just as much exposure to coronavirus as,
Well, yeah, and
any other frontline worker. And they also have less medical expertise and less medical resources. Oh, we got another. Okay, we had to cut away because we didn't want to accidentally dox
somebody who'd called.
Ourselves, somebody else, I don't know, yeah.
But what's funny is we rarely ever do this. This was actually harder than I realized, because normally we just do it in one take.
Yeah.
But so you were talking about personal support workers and why they may not be at as high a risk as some people who work directly with known COVID-19 cases.
But they are as high risk when there are people in the homes, because they have direct exposure, they have less access to resources, and people aren't prioritizing giving them the resources.
Right.
So people are donating masks to hospitals.
And the recognition is way lower. And they're not acknowledged as being the kind of people who are really contributing to supporting our healthcare system.
And in terms of the people who are getting the free stuff, we don't need to give that much free stuff to doctors. It's great. I'm not saying we shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that doctors, if they are financially responsible, can live at a standard of living which is better than most other people.
And they're still getting work now.
Yeah, and they're still getting work. So they're definitely not out of work. And I think it is great to show our appreciation. That isn't to say that I'm at all ungrateful, and not to say that they should not be getting the free stuff that they are. It's just that personal support workers should be also getting the same
so
stuff.
It's not so much a zero-sum game as that that we need to include personal support workers among the front line workers who are making it possible for us to survive this current crisis.
Yeah, and in terms of a gesture, I think the gesture is the same no matter who you're giving it to. But in terms of being actually practical, the type of people that could use a free meal are not physicians. It is the personal support workers.
It's true.
Right? The impact that makes on people who are maybe having their hours forcibly cut, right?
Right.
And who are not making nearly as much in the first place.
Right, because that's what the government's doing. They're saying that you can't work at other places. So maybe they'll make up the other hours where they are, because those other places will all of a sudden lose a huge proportion of their workforce, because now they can't keep all of them. People will be picking where they want to work.
Yeah. But either way, they need more.
So that was the one point I was going to make about the what the government should do.
Yeah.
The other point that's happening is that there's talk about that the United States government, so we're going to move further afield now, is they're saying that they're no longer going to bail out the United States Postal Service. And there's so many things wrong with that statement. First of which is the language. It's not a bailout.
Yeah.
This is a system, a business, a service that's enshrined in the Constitution. It's not even an amendment. Like, for all the arguments about the First Amendment for your rights to free speech, and the Second Amendment for rights to bear, for a regulated militia to bear arms.
It would be like if you said, I've decided to stop supporting my muscle groups, instead of saying that you're not going to work out anymore.
Right. Seriously, it's fundamental.
It should be a part of you.
It's not a bailout when you pay to maintain your roads.
Yeah.
That's the function of the government. That's literally in the Constitution. So, and here's the other thing. I'm a Canadian, seriously, and I don't know how people in the States don't realize this, but the fact that the USPS is even struggling a little bit now is literally a result of legislation that was passed in 2006. So, let me quote. In 2006, Congress passed a law that imposed extraordinary costs on the U.S. Postal Service. The Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act required the USPS to create a $72 billion fund to pay for the cost of its post-retirement healthcare costs 75 years into the future. This burden applies to no other federal agency or private corporation. So in Canada, too, every other thing that you've got, you need to fund what you've got now.
Yeah.
And based on whatever actuarial table is about what the demands are, you need to make sure that what you're contributing, continue to contribute, will be enough going forward. But they don't expect you to fund the next 75 years worth of expenses. Like, how the hell do you work if you need to guarantee that you've got 75 years worth of money, that you can't have a business running unless you've got the money to keep it running for 75 years with no other inputs?
Yeah.
That is ridiculous. U.S. Postal Service, mail service in general, is screwed when the private companies get to handpick all the routes that are profitable, where it's worth it because you got a truck, you're not driving one piece of mail. And they dump the last mile on the USPS because it's not profitable, and then the USPS still has to do it because they are funded to do that, to make sure that everybody in the States has access.
Yeah, it's just a worse system when you, like, talk about single-payer healthcare, right?
Yeah,
well, you want to make privately funded postal service. That's not...
Right.
You know,
because
there's so much infrastructure.
If the U.S. Postal Service ever dies, what you're going to rely on is, FedEx and UPS and whatever, and they are not going to bother delivering to rural areas the same way.
Yeah. Or they will at exorbitant fees.
So, and that ties in nicely. So we've got a couple minutes. We will leave some of Stelmaria's comments for next week. I wasn't planning on it, but it ties into the other bailout that's maybe a couple weeks old, where United Airlines was being bailed out, with the only limitation was that they were not going to lay off people until after September 30th, and then within hours they announced, we're going to lay off people after September 30th.
Yeah.
So
it's not helping the workers. The money is not going to the people.
Right. And that's where the money gets spent, because here's the thing. The idea that there's a company like an airline that's too big to fail is ridiculous, because it doesn't just disappear. All those jobs don't just go away and nothing happens.
Yeah.
If there's demand for flights, when a company goes bankrupt, they sell their assets.
Yeah.
Cheap, recover some of the costs. Somebody who's interested in buying some cheap airplanes will buy them.
And then you might end up with like a budget airline.
And they will be hiring the pilots, they will be hiring the mechanics, they will be hiring technicians.
Yeah.
And what you're doing when you give money to an airline that's failed because they spent too much of their profits in the last few years buying back their own stocks, is that you're saving a bad business model, and you're killing the opportunity for another business model to come. I mean, this is the whole idea of capitalism, right? Like, capitalism isn't that you get to make money when times are good and then you get bailed out when times are bad. Capitalism is, if you got a good plan, some of them will be successful and some of them will fail.
This is like the worst version of an already bad system.
Yeah. So the fact that they're willing to bail out United and they're unwilling to fund the U.S. Postal Service properly is ridiculous. I mean, I don't know. Mm-hmm. Listen, if you're American, we're really hurting for you. I don't know what the heck is going on, but I really hope you guys get out of this with most of your country intact.
So, we're out of time here. You're out of comments. One thing I will say, we'll save Stelmaria's podcast comment for later, but I did say I would recommend some podcasts at some point in this episode, so I think I'll do them rapid fire. This is no commentary on sort of their age appropriateness. Right. So, if you are not okay with profanity or anything, you'll have to look at these on a one-by-one basis. Yep. They're not going to sound exactly like ours, obviously. But just really quick. Really, really great. My brother and me, incredible.
Right.
Behind the Bastards, super informative, really interesting. And some of the other stuff that the same guy does, Robert Evans, Worst Year Ever, is a really interesting political one. It is very, very left-wing. So, know that going in. Might not be everybody's thing. Reply All is great. And you can vouch for that too.
Yep.
Reply All is stellar. Invisibilia, some interesting psychology, some pop psychology. You might have to do your own research. Don't, take everything that they say at full face value, but it's still very well researched. They do a pretty nuanced perspective on a lot of stuff. And hopefully it'll make you interested in new topics, which is, I think, their primary goal. Heavyweight is really good.
Okay.
And then 36 Questions, the podcast musical. Really strong piece of media, only a couple hours. But there we go. That's a good set of podcasts. Mostly that update on a regular or semi-regular basis. Everything except 36 Questions is, I think, still strong and active currently.
Right.
So there we go. And that is all. So to finish up, we'd like to give a thank you to some special people who are supporting us on Patreon.
So, did you miss...
I missed my shout-out. That's true. Very important. I was in my podcast app, so I was recommending podcasts. I was not. I was hoping that you would take it over, but that's true. I have to give it a shout out to Eliza the Fugitive Caton. She was able to go for a socially distanced walk with a friend. I don't actually know if this was against the rules or not. I'm just saying the fugitive because it feels like a natural progression from last week. This shout out has been brought to you. Last week was The Hope of Freedom, and this is A Taste of Freedom. Where there's real character growth happening.
All right, so big thank you to our patrons on Patreon. Big thank you to Consul Peasant and Edwoon supporting us at the highest tier Last Word. Mohammed Albshaiti, Your Message Here tier. Shawn Farrell, Daniel Simonson, Aaron Maule, Michael DeVries, and Brandon C., who support us on the credited level. And Chris Wolf and Scarlet Envy at the gratitude level.
And thanks so much to all of you for watching or listening. We'll see you next time.
Komoda.